Once you play any game enough, it starts to get easier and easier, and there's only so much you can do to keep it fresh. And with that said, I've played this game too much. So, let's do something truly insane to Dark Souls 3 this time, making all the enemies invisible. Alright, you've seen challenge runs before, you know the drill. We make an assassin for irony's sake, and Lothric is upon us. At first, the game seems easy enough, right? Wrong! Turns out, it is really hard to fight an enemy when you can't see it. We do have prism stones that we can throw and stick on enemies, but we're gonna save them for really hard fights. The Ravenous Crystal Lizard is our first little mini challenge, and what a challenge it is. The lizard leaves behind a little trail of crystals wherever it goes, so he's not too bad, and we can lead it off the edge with a bit of trouble. Gundyr, however, is a little more complicated. A few normal tries in, and we can barely even hit the boss, let alone dodge the attacks. So, we decide that we'll use a Prism Stone on Gundyr just to get in the swing of things. Well, our first challenge in that regard is to actually hit Gundyr with the dang stone. The throw animation is just that of the throwing knife. You know, something that nobody uses, so estimating the arc of the throw will take some getting used to. You think that you could just throw a Prism Stone at a starting position, and the fight would become a piece of cake. And I thought that too, but he moves somewhere right as the fight starts, so it's kinda hard to guess. We started this character with 40 Prism Stones, and we're already down by about half just trying to hit him. We get destroyed a lot. Sometimes it's hard to even tell how we died. But throwing a stone in the right spot to stick to Gundyr changes the dynamic a little bit. Now, if you have a lot of game skill and very little social skills, you can make out what he's doing and when. With this, we can actually parry him twice. Wait, I parried Gundyr twice? From a Prism Stone? And make it to phase 2. We're just circling him counterclockwise, dodges most of his attacks. Then we can lead the Swordmaster off. Hey, I just want to take a second. Oh, was I interrupting? Sorry. Oh wait, you're still here? Okay. Are you subscribed? I do all these videos by myself and put about 45 hours into every one of my videos. And I upload weekly. If you're enjoying the content, you can check if you're subscribed. Lots of people don't realize that they're not actually subscribed. We're really close to 10K, so I'd appreciate it. Also, join our community Discord. Some of the people in there are really cool, and we host monthly challenge runs and events. Last month's event was Dark Souls 1, Broken Straight Sword Hill only, and we had one person to complete it, Laura, who I'll link to in the description. This month is Starter Gear only in any Souls game. There's already quite a few people starting on it, so be sure to join the Discord for rules and specifics for the challenge. Sorry about that, back to the madness. Oh, what were we doing up here? Swordmaster? There's clearly nobody up here. What are you talking about? We level strength some, and sell our starting gift soul for about 400 Prism Stones. That should hold us off for a while, I hope. Then we do the tree jump for an extra Estus shard, and the Silver Serpent Ring, since this run is bound to be pretty soul hungry. We then allot all our Estus to healing, and use our Flask shard, bringing us to 5 total Estus. Now, the cinders are yet to rest upon their thrones, and the fire fades once more. Lothric is calling. So, though not at all ready, we again head to Highwall. In Highwall, we have a lot to learn for the run proper. Specifically with the hollows here. They have a little flame particle by their waist, presumably from a lantern or something like that. But, as you can see, that lets us track their location, along with the actual lantern-holding enemies that alert the rest of the surrounding guys. But, with those lantern-holding enemies in particular, they hold their lantern pretty far in front of what their hitbox would normally be. So, you have to remember their usual placements, and the direction they're typically facing to actually land a hit, and not let the lantern guy alert all the surrounding enemies, which gets you killed pretty much always. We also equip the club here to start focusing on strength instead of dex. Why did I start Assassin, you may ask? Don't ask me, man. Another thing that comes as a product of this mode of play is that you don't ever have to worry about mimics, because they're invisible. What a cool plus. Wait, they're invisible. That's really bad. I mean, how do you even kill an invisible mimic? That just sounds like a nightmare, let alone when you get grabbed. Well, that's the situation I was in, trying to kill this mimic. Eventually, after lots of testing and experimenting... I think I'm getting flying jump kicked. I can't tell, but I think that's what's happening. We get the hang of the AI enough to loot this mimic, for a relatively useless item. Then, we run down to the armory and high wall, avoiding the dangerous, now invisible Spear Knight, to grab another Estus shard, and the cell key for a very specific gray-colored rat. For now, though, the Frost Elemental Vort is here to fight us. The fight actually looks pretty cool, if not just as easy as normal. Just instead of a dog, it's a mass of frozen energy with some glowing blue eyes. We take him out, free Grey Rat, and kill Emma to raise our newly acquired banner for access to the Undead Settlement. Right before that, though, we go grab Leonhard's mask for ourselves. You know, why can't he just, give me the dang mask, dude? You could live, but you just can't give me your helmet. But then we go and actually raise the banner, like I said. Good news? Lots of enemies still have some way of identification. Bad news, the ones that don't, are a lot worse. Before, it was usually just some hollow who was too lowly to even have armor. Now it's usually a thrall, or even an evangelist, which are like mini Gundyrs in the way they swing their mace. So, we just run through, and avoid what we can, while grabbing the Estus and Titanite shards we have time for. This area is also made tougher by the fact that surprise enemy encounters catch us off guard when they usually wouldn't, and the reason for this is simple. I'll give you a hint. It's because we can't see them. And since we can't see them, it's harder to remember where they are. Hence, us getting ambushed. I mean, you probably knew they were there, right? You're so cool and amazing. We then give Loretta's bone to Grey Rat, and reset a few times until Grey Rat gets over his dumb grief, so we can send him on an expedition. Seriously, who grieves over the loss of someone dear to them? Loser. Then, we grab the Undead Bone Shard in the settlement, along with the Reinforced Club, while we're still using random weapons. We unlock the shortcut to our next boss as well, and take him head on. Well, this upcoming boss is certainly the hardest to spot so far, as well as track. Knowing where the wood isn't quite enough. You have to know where his weak spot is, which is more of a challenge. His henchmen are also quite a bit of an annoyance. Even if he tends to take most of them out, they still diminish our health hit by hit, enough so that we die in Phase 2 due to lack of heals. Phase 2 is also much worse than Phase 1 will ever be, because instead of one larger weak spot, the Great Wood has many smaller weak spots, and the weak spots are hard enough to find, but if you don't pop them on first discovery, you have to do it all over again, each time, until he would theoretically go down. I decide this is another boss that Prism Stones are applicable on, just because even knowing where the boss's approximate location is doesn't remove the challenge entirely. Even being able to dodge attacks doesn't remove the challenge. I still have to figure out how I'm hitting this guy. We make it to Phase 2 another time, are able to deal some damage, but the odds are just too stacked against us to make much more progress. So, at least until I get another better weapon, we're moving on. That takes us to the elevator past the Great Wood, where we go grab most of the rest of our armor. But before, we fight the demon here with Siegmeyer. And as well as the previously mentioned armor I got, we're also awarded with the Chloranthy Ring. And now, we head to the Road of Sacrifices. There's another Frost Elemental right by the bonfire here, and because of my lack of skill, I use the door to reset his aggro, and kill it after a bit. And for now, the sword that this guy dropped is actually a bit better, so we'll use it. Our demons in this area actually lose most of their health to frostbite, so in cases where we choose to fight, we usually take them out. Well, when the demons aren't particularly formidable we do. We grab the Grass Crest Shield while getting chased by many enemies. At least I think. Like, I think they're following me? Is it all in my... At least these guys are visible. Good old fair fights. Wait, there's another guy here. I am being followed. One thing about the magic casters here is that they're really good at ambushing us. I know where they are like the back of my hand. I've died to the sage enough times to know, but we're not ready for when they cast, and it hits us pretty good sometimes. Now for the sage herself. The sage shows up, but then instantly disappears, leaving us to rely on visual magic cues as well as audio cues. The sage is rather loud when she appears, leading us to her every time. Phase 2 is an interesting twist on this fight, at least for this mod. My assumption is that many invisible clones would show up, and be nearly impossible to take down. But you can see the clones as they spawn in, since they take a second to go invisible after spawning. So, by process of elimination, we can find the real sage, and with some more sound cues, like the frostbite of my sword, we can find our way to the sage and take her out for our first try victory. With a boss successfully killed, we can go buy the Zwei from Grey Rat, and the tower key from the Shrine Handmaid. This gets us the last piece of our armor, and the Estus ring, for better Estus recovery. We then head towards Farron Keep a bit early. We try to tag team with Gravity to kill these invisible exiles, but it turns out Gravity is a neutral party. Farron Keep itself is an area in which it's a bad idea to fight at all. If you're not poisoned by default, the enemies poison you, and grab you too. Well, at least I can see that one now. We're not here to go see another boss though. We're here for some souls. And those souls are going to come from the Stray Demon, who takes a while to find. Ow! Once we have him in our sights, we can keep track of him with his ever-dwindling health bar, which is actually a strategy that we've used before to kill the Mimic and other tough, non-boss enemies. But after a while, we get him. Once he's dead, we grab the Dream Chase's ashes, which gives us infinite Titanite shards to upgrade our weapon to +3 and some souls to put into strength. With these new tools, we try the Greatwood again. In Phase 1, we manage to find and keep track of the bubbles, and other than the annoying hollows, it's pretty easy. So we pop the bubbles, then we notice the dirt from one of the legs falling, and know that we can hit the weak point there for massive damage. Then, in Phase 2, we want to stick the hand, since that's the main way we can deal damage and tell what's going on. If the Prism Stones deal damage when they land on the Greatwood, that's a good sign. It doesn't always mean we've hit the hand, but it can mean a weak point to pop. Honestly, this is when I figured out you can just spam the Prism Stones. So, we do it to get a solid layout on the boss, sort of like a skeleton. It made the boss pretty easy, honestly. Whoops. We won't be doing that again, unless there's some real trouble. Back to the Crucifixion Woods, we're heading towards the cathedral, and some invisible sword swingers, invisible dogs, invisible immolationists, just the usual, but you know, made into hell. We light the spawn fire. Wait, why can't I light it? Oh god! We light the spawn fire. Okay, sorry to interrupt. I had some pretty major footage corruption during this recording, and a lot of the footage just is still frames for some reason. I'll put a timestamp up if you guys want to skip the explanation and just get to what I'm going to do about it. But basically, what happened is I installed a stream plugin so I could stream vertically on YouTube and horizontally to Twitch, and that plugin messed everything up so that when I tapped out of Dark Souls, whenever I would tap back in, the frame rate of the recording would drop, and it would drop more and more and more every time I did it. And I tap out a lot to do a lot of other stuff, like script writing, or like, you know, if I'm watching YouTube while I'm doing my runs, just stuff like that. You might have noticed the footage is a little bit lower quality than normal, and that's also a product of this. I have no clue. It's fixed now, though. So, I'll try to make it funny, but I did shoot some replacement footage. Those, like, it's a really weird smattering of bosses. It's one now, and then it doesn't happen for a long time later. Full transparency, I shot it on the Deacons, the Twin Princes, Sister Frida and the Champion's Grave Tender, Half-Light, Gale, and Solar Cinder. Oh yeah, it happened on the Nameless King's kill specifically, and the Dragon Slayer armor's kill. And that's really weird. It feels really like I'm cheating almost. Like, it feels like I could use this as an excuse for cheating, because there's a lot of footage of the Nameless King and the Dragon Slayer armor, but the kills specifically, there's screenshots of them. Like, not screenshots, but like, there's frames of the recording where they die, I think, for both of them, but no, like, full video because of this stupid bug. So I have some plans to make it a little funnier. I have some other plans, but I will put like a symbol up. I'll put the symbol up on screen now. Whenever that symbol shows up, that means that it's going to be a replaced recording, but I can't just like redo the whole run because I found this out 2 days before the video's about to go out as I'm editing, because it only started like a little bit. The first few sessions were just completely clean for some reason, but I fixed the issue. It won't happen again. Sorry. Hope you guys enjoy the video. I worked really hard on this one. We light the spawn fire and grab the totally unguarded Estus Shard, along with the Undead Bone Shard here. We continue to progress through the rooftops without any trouble, and make it into the cathedral. The cathedral is oddly peaceful. I feel like we're forgetting something. God damn, that was pretty bad. Thankfully, I'm okay. Open? Not this time. This mimic is totally dead. Not again. Go ahead and unlock the shortcuts into the Cleansing Chapel, and after that, we're free to take on the Deacons. The Deacons are a collection of red eyes, and some lights. Honestly, the Zwei is made for this kind of fight. We can light swing and crowd control every enemy near us down. That, and we do enough damage to kind of destroy the main one anyway. After that, we put some more levels into Vigor as to not get one shot, and head back to Fair and Keep, where we put out the last fire and open the way to the Abyss Watchers. Well, there's actually an invisible war going on before that, but then we get to the Abyss Watchers. We enter the fight, and after watching the cutscene, we forget the Watchers are even supposed to be invisible, which leads to circumstances. At least the one that helps us has red eyes. That way, we can track the main one who's fighting it. Once we get into Phase 2, the fight is deceptively hard. Oh, you can see his eyes and his sword. Sounds easy, right? Well, a lot of the startup for attacks are foretold in other parts of his body. So, we're not ready for attacks, and that means it's hard to tell what he's doing and when. It's also really easy to lose him. What we're looking for is a small pair of red eyes and flames other than the big circling flames here. So even though we lose track of him, miss our attacks, and get hit, the Abyss Watchers still go down. The catacombs are pretty uneventful, to their detriment. The skeletons are also invisible, to nobody's shock, meaning there's no 2 FPS skeletons while we destroy the bridge. Put a sad face here. Why do I have to say editing instructions? Cut this part. Volnir is similarly boring. I don't have to pretend to freak out to you about how the gameplay of me, 3 yellow lights, and the goddamn fog is interesting. So long story short, we kill him, and level up our strength some more, before heading to the Smoldering Lake. We fight the boss of all fire VFX, and some eyes team up with us too, for the kill. There's some large Titanite here, as well as Lightning Incarnate, who thankfully goes down to some normal-sized ballista shots. We get the Estus upgrades here.
Whoa, I just killed 7 rats.
Level using our souls, and get a +6 weapon. The old Demon King's primary strategy is to stay under his big weapon, because he has trouble hitting you when you're directly under him. But he's invisible, so this is a difficult task. We manage to tank the attacks that do hit us, and when we make it to Phase 2, the demon gains an outline, making the rest of this fight hardly different from a normal run. And he doesn't even get his big explosion off before we take him out. Then we head into Irithyll, where we blindly stun and kill this, Irithyll is mostly normal. Lots of enemies are semi-invisible anyway, so they're kind of designed with this run in mind in a way. And there's also the fact that we just run through Irithyll like everyone else does. Well, other than Undead Bone Shard. Pontiff as well, fine. He may look invisible, but his swords show up, which means we can parry him. and you all know how easy Pontiff is. Well, okay, on our next try, we do a little better and actually make it to phase 2, where we realize his clone, it's invisible. For those of you who don't know, Pontiff's clone moves first, so on top of barely being able to tell what Pontiff is doing, we have to anticipate it anyway, because his clone just does it first. I end up waiting until the clone resets to on top of Pontiff to kill him, and by the time Pontiff tries to resummon, his fate is sealed. The rest of Irithyll is a bit scary, being shot at by nothing, and while escaping, some lightning comes and hits us. Well, you know what they say, lightning never strikes twice. Why did anyone come up with that? The inside of Anor Londo is pretty much a horror game, with red eyes and all. There's an Estus Shard here, and our second Lord of Cinder. Aldrich's most vulnerable hitbox sits near his weapon, and that's the one thing we can actually see, which is useful for us. The fight is pretty easy, but it's cool to see how some things, like the life on Scythe and the arrows, are actually particles, and not models. After we kill Aldrich, we grab the Sun Princess ring, which may come in handy if we're ever out of Estus in a boss fight, but not quite in the way you think. After leveling up Endurance some more, we head through Irithyll one last time to make it to the dungeon. The dungeon isn't too horrible, the jailers are hardly less visible than the normal, but apart from an invisible ambush, a mimic we need to kill for an Estus Shard, and a jump to skip some annoying enemies, we make it to the Profane Capital pretty easily, which contains one of our last Undead Bone Shards. Oh, my runs grow up so fast. How quickly this one is coming to an end. As for Yorm, we don't want to use the Storm Ruler to trivialize the fight, but it's clear that this fight is almost certainly impossible with no help, although we do manage to hit his head once. So we throw Prism Stones at him. We get the general shape of his legs and body, and throw one stone near his head, and that's enough to track his basic movement, although actually hitting him still turns out to be a challenge. Phase 2 comes around, and Yorm gets really fiery, which is cool. Like, this guy could be a genuine character design. Someone should make this. Well, they should have, before I killed him. Well, now it's time to come back to Lothar Castle, for Dancer. We can generally tell where she is due to particles that come off her now invisible cape, and we can also see her weapon. So, this is easy, right? Wrong. First, there are attacks like the Hand Slap, that have no visible tell, but also, Dancer does attacks I swear I've never seen before, but maybe it's just hard to tell which attack is happening. Nonetheless, we're able to take Dancer out using most of our Estus, tanking most hits, and dishing damage back. You want this bowl? Hey, people care about. Drop down to Osiris, has some chunks of Titanite, and a shard of Estus. And the run itself, ow! Osiris has no tells for where he is or what he's doing visually, except for when he's casting Pestilent Mist, and when he spins in phase 2. But he's loud, and he yaps way too much. This is something that we use to our advantage, much like the Crystal Sage. When he starts talking, we're able to pinpoint his location pretty accurately. Even in phase 2, when he stops talking, we can go off of his screams, which lead us to him more reliably than something like his breath seems to. We even riposte him, which is something I've never seen before. Well, I guess I still haven't seen Osiris get riposted. We then turn this wall invisible, and head to the Untended Graves. And we have to fix what we started. We beat Gundyr with the Prism Stone when we didn't have to. So, for Champion Gundyr, let's do this the right way. Phase 1 is pretty hopeless. The best I can manage is to take his predictable starting attack and lay on the pressure enough to keep track of him, into phase 2, where he gains 2 soul red eyes. You can tell what he wants to do by his movement and the angle of his eyes. If they seem oddly focused on you, he might be running at you. If they're to the side, he's gonna do a sweeping attack. We can use our parry shield to try and parry Gundyr, or a much needed break, or some damage. Not both, because if you heal after riposting, you take damage. Eventually, we get into the swing of things. So, with a lot of luck, and some sheer force of will, we kill Champion Gundyr. Man, that felt good. We head into the Flameless Firelink to grab some items, like the Coiled Sword, and the what? What was that? I have like 250,000 souls, man. Can anyone explain what happened here? We re-grab our souls, level up endurance and vitality some more, and head into Lothar Castle, the final area of the main game. We're back to enemies with fire lanterns in this area, which would be nice if there weren't also enemies that are completely invisible. There's another undead bone shard, and some fire we run through. Well, we try to. We run through the rest of Lothar Castle, and here comes the Dragon Slayer armor. The armor's weapon is visible through the lightning coming off of it, but his shield isn't. So, on top of some attacks just not being foretold, lots of them are deceptively foretold with just the lightning axe. At least the Pilgrim Butterflies function as normal when invisible. I mean, you might not even notice they were gone. But overall, it's still a really tough fight. The Dragon Slayer armor is mostly built on defying your expectations. So, when all I have to go off of is his weapon, which is usually what a new player would focus on, my expectations are defied a lot. But, I don't have any more expectations to make. So, I'm just kind of forced to fight the armor like a noob would. Rolling away, spamming heals. Man, this one really just reverted my brain state. I mean, not to like make fun of any of you first time players or anything. The game is just hard when you feel new. But after a few attempts, we're forced to prevail. I mean, of course we did. You're watching this video, aren't you? Now, we're back to Irithyll Dungeon. And now, I have the chance to mention how annoying these rats are. They're invisible, sure, but if I wasn't able to one-shot the small ones and two-shot the big ones, they'd be so relentless. Hell, we even have trouble swinging to kill them. But we're here to run to Archdragon Peak, so we do that. And man, is this area just empty or something? Oh, right. We make it to the Ancient Wyvern that's totally not just a hallucination, and well, our shadowboxing gets us killed before we even move far at all. So, we run through this boss and plunge nothing. Oh, well, we actually plunge nothing. Well, we do it again. And something to realize while doing this fight is that it's really hard to get hit and get tricked by these guys when you can't even see them. Like, it was really hard to get hit here. Not that we want to, but we plunge nothing for one of the best animations in this run yet. Oh yeah, and for the kill too. And I'll be honest, I'm 90% sure not a single person here cares about the rest of this area, other than the Dragon Chaser's ashes and the Titanite slab. But now, with the maxed out weapon, we take on the King of the Storm. This is the first boss that likes to move wherever he wants. Sure, other bosses move a lot, like the Crystal Sage, but she only moves into one of a few spots. And yeah, bosses like the Dragon Slayer armor move a ton, but it's always towards you. So this time, it's much harder since I'm missing the lock-on mechanic. The King of the Storm also had just about no visual cues, other than the floor the dragon is on, which only shows its feet. In case you didn't know, we're trying to hit its head instead, so that information isn't very useful. But here, instead of talking, let me show you just what I'm dealing with. Here's a completely in-context example. What will the King of the Storm do? Will he A. Jump up in the air and breathe fire? B. Jump up in the air and throw lightning? C. Swing sideways twice and hit us with lightning, killing us instantly? Or D. Fly behind us and catch us off guard? Did you choose D? Either way, you're wrong because he instantly thrusts us, leaving no time to react. There's honestly so many whiffed attacks, and the only reason this phase is hard is because I refuse to use a Prism Stone to make it easier out of principle. But we get some good hits in, and it leads to an insanely lucky stagger, which does enough damage to be put into phase 2, the Nameless King. That thing about the boss moving? Yeah, it's so much worse. Who cares that you can see the boss's weapon? That means nothing. It's so hard to even land a hit. And it's so stressful when every time you die, you have to go back to the worst thing in existence again. You have to learn phase 2 completely on its own, as a new fight, because the recognizable poses from his attacks are replaced by a bolt of lightning at a weird angle, moving around a massive wind. On some attempts, we miss so much because of how deceptively far he is. We miss so much that we could have killed him twice if we hit all our misses, which is so crushing to know attempt after attempt. But time after time, we slowly learn when to dodge, not having to pivot our camera for crazier attacks, and eventually, the king falls. No time to rest, let's go to the Grand Archives. This area is oddly empty, like all the enemies are invisible, or something. It does have our last Undead Bone Shard, and our last Estus Shard, which brings us to 15 plus 10 Estus, before we unlock the shortcut and go fight the Twin Princes. The Twin Princes are really bad, like really, really bad levels of pure bad. But Spelunker, you can see the sword and where he teleports. Wrong, his sword randomly turns off, and although you can see where Lorien teleports, you have to know what he's going to be doing. Personally, my muscle memory was geared towards no enemy, he's dropping on top of you from above, dodge. But now, every teleport doesn't show us our enemy, so we just have to guess when to roll. And my muscle memory kind of overwrote that in this fight. And that's just one facet of the basically final boss of Dark Souls 3, an already extremely complex game. Another thing to worry about is, well, actually dodging. Telling me when I'm safe, when I'm in danger, or telling whether or not I even want to beat this game is pretty much impossible. Again, one line of fire isn't any easier than one line of lightning in terms of telling where to hit, especially when it looks like Lorien can just move around without me noticing. Being safe in this fight primarily revolves around your distance to Lorien. So, when I can't tell whether he's behind his sword, or in front of his sword, and about to maul me to death with fire— wait, you can't maul someone with fire. Burn me to death with fire, the fight ends up being pretty hard. Phase 2 makes this worse, with long stretches of everywhere becoming unsafe for healing, due to the projectiles Lothric spawns, as well as new follow-ups to attacks, and effectively, increased health on the boss since Lothric reses Lorien over and over. But on our first try, we're one hit away from doing it? Do we? Of course not! We haven't spent 3 hours on it, he's not gonna die yet. We do get him though, and head back to the Cleansing Chapel. Into the DLC, the Return of the Frost Elementals. We head down the ladder, and to the Champion's Grave Tender. The Champion's Grave Tender is, well, horribly annoying. The 3 dogs are a small issue, still an annoying issue, but small. We one-shot them with Lloyd's Ring, and after a bit, they go down. And the Grave Tender himself isn't too bad to just spam down, since he's just generally in front of us. The wolf, however, was annoying. We can kind of tell where she is, but only where she was, and it usually ends up in us getting hit. So, a couple of Prism Stones later, and the boss goes down. The rest of the DLC is just a solid run. When nothing is visible, nothing gets in our way. Now, we're to Frida. She's pretty tough, but even her most deadly attacks can be circumvented. We head back to Firelink and level Luck. We're gonna need it. Frida is really good at keeping you guessing. Oh, snow kicked up on the ground? You think you know where she is? Wrong! At the very least, her actual invisibility attacks aren't made harder. But that's a small consolation prize for the really tough and punishing Phase 1 where you die if you get hit 3 times. Oh, and don't you heal, you're gonna need those heals for the rest of the fight. That's it for Phase 1, and Phase 2 is actually easier. Father Ariandel is huge, it's almost like you can't miss him. Even when Frida gets all up in our business, we can make it. And when she's attacking from a range or attempting to heal, she's easily dispatched. Phase 3 is easily the worst though. It's hard to even keep track of her, and she has so much health, and she does so much damage. She's relentless. Ugh. Every time, we have to do it all again. I'm so tired. I don't care. Just use Prism Stones and get the job done. Well, what's left, right? 5 bosses? We can do that. Easy. We'll just take a quick shortcut to the first and drop to them. The twin demons appear to be business as usual. You can see the active one with the flame effects, and the invisible one is usually not in your line of sight anyway, since he's not the one directly attacking you, or the one you're hitting back in the moment. They're also not the tankiest, leading to a couple quick deaths, and a revival for Phase 2. The Demon Prince can also be tracked, although seeing what he's doing doesn't end up being the easiest. We can really only tell if he's doing projectiles or melee, and the reason for this is simple. We can see when he's using projectiles, and if he's not using a projectile, he's doing a melee attack. And although we take a lot of damage, this boss ultimately results in a first try victory for us. We then get a little deja vu, and get taken to the Ring City, where the rest of our bosses in the DLC lie. Most big and scary enemies here at least have some particles, if not being mostly made out of them. So though it's pretty similar, it's raining fire! The Bridge Midir is actually pretty dang easy. Just look at it. You can almost see the outline of where Midir is, head and all, especially because he likes to breathe fire out of his teeth to the side. So we do whatever this is, pick up the +3 Chloranthy ring, and drop to the real Midir fight. Where is he? Oh, right. Well, this boss isn't the cakewalk I was prepared for. Turns out, Midir is a lot harder when he's not hanging off a ledge, literally asking to be hit. It's so hard to tell what Midir is doing with only particles, or even where his head is, since so many attacks look the same, and when in the downtime between those attacks, Midir isn't even visible. And since it took us like 15 minutes to barely make it to Phase 2, we use Prism Stones, and slowly mark his rough skeleton. His head, his front 2 legs, one for his body, and that's all we need to see pretty much exactly what he's doing. And when it's business as normal, Champion of Ash will win. Half-Light isn't too much more of an issue than the Gravetender was. He's just some backstabs on the ads, and mindless swinging until Half-Baked runs into us too much, and dies. Then we have Gale. Gale. Gale is completely invisible in Phase 1, apart from a few sword swings. And, Phase 2 isn't any better. We get to it once, but after that, it's just... I'm at a loss for words.
I just saw a man of colored lights reach out to me as he died.
After that madness, we place the Cinders on their thrones. And now, it's time for the Soul of Cinder. Damage is instantly recognizable as well, a lot, compared to the boss we just fought. But he's pretty relentless, especially in the spear phase where we just get hit over and over. Honestly, this might be the only way Soul of Cinder has ever been hard. But after we drain its health bar, it refills once again. And this is our final test. We hit by hit, take him down, and even when we get grabbed, it just shows us more of him. So in the end, he falls, and with some final decorations, and the Cinders finally resting upon their thrones, a long journey comes to an end.